From the quiet fields, where the wind carries more than whispers, and the soil remembers every drop that's ever fed it. This is Night Harvest. Tonight's story is Red Salt.
The sea had learned the sound of her footsteps. Each night when Maren stepped out of the lighthouse and down the narrow stone path, the wind rose to greet her as if remembering her weight on the earth. The lantern's glass eye threw one ribbon of gold through the fog, and every gull that drifted across it looked for an instant as though it burned. Her father had died 3 winters ago, found face down in the surf with his keys still tied to his belt. Since then, the lighthouse had been hers, the last warm pulse on a coastline already given over to ruin. There were only 7 families left in the village below, and all of them swore that the light was what kept the sea ghosts from coming ashore. Maren didn't believe in sea ghosts, but she believed in the sea. Every evening she trimmed the wick, poured the new oil, and whispered a line of the old keeper's prayer, half out of duty, half out of loneliness. When the lamp caught and the glass flared white, she felt the world shrink to the circle of light around her. Beyond that, wind, salt, and the endless breathing dark. It was on such a night, with the fog crawling low and the bell from the harbor swallowed in mist, that she saw the first light blink back. At first she thought it a trick of reflection. Her own lantern echoed on a wave, but then it moved, rising and falling, coming closer. A lantern bobbing on the sea, too steady for wreckage, too slow for a ship. She pressed her hands against the glass and narrowed her eyes. A man was out there. She threw on her coat, seized the smaller hand lamp, and descended the cliff path. The steps were slick with spray. The wind tried to turn her by the shoulders, muttering its usual warnings. Below, the surf hissed over black rocks, and the strange light drifted between them like a soul unwilling to come ashore. When she reached the tide line, the light vanished. Only the waves remained, clawing at the shingle. "Hello," she called, though the wind tore her voice apart. Something thudded against the rocks. Wood, not bone. A piece of hull, no larger than a door. A hand clung to it. Maren waded in before thought could stop her. The water knifed her calves with cold. She caught the man under the arms and hauled him free. His weight nearly dragged her back under, but the tide relented, shoving them both onto sand. The man coughed once, twice, spilling seawater and a darker stain she didn't want to name. He was alive. He looked scarcely older than she, 25 perhaps, but his skin was pale as driftwood and his hair, black when wet, dried to a faint silver sheen in the lantern light. Around his throat hung a fragment of red glass bound in wire. "Easy," she murmured, pressing a hand to his chest. "You're safe." His eyes opened, gray, so pale they seemed almost colorless. He looked not at her, but past her, toward the lighthouse beam sweeping the fog. "Still burning," he whispered. She didn't ask what he meant. By dawn she had him in the keeper's cottage, wrapped in blankets near the stove. His pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. When she tried to loosen the cord around his neck, his hand shot up and caught hers. "Don't," he rasped. "It'll strangle you." "It keeps me here." She left it. When the storm lifted, the sea lay calm as poured lead. No sign of a wreck. The villagers said no ship had passed for days. They told her to let the sea keep what it had offered. That wreck men brought ruin. But Maren had never been good at obedience. She nursed him through the fever, spooning broth past lips gone salt white. When he slept, he muttered in a language that tasted like Latin and mourning. When he woke, he gave her nothing but his name. Elias. He stayed. Days lengthened. Gulls nested, and the villagers whispered that the keeper had taken in a spirit. Maren didn't care. The light burned steadier than ever, and for the first time since her father's death, the lighthouse no longer felt like a tomb. Sometimes, at night, she found Elias standing at the lantern room window, bare feet on cold metal, staring into the black. Once she heard him speak, a low, pleading murmur, to the horizon itself. "What do you see?" she asked. "The place I came from," he said, "the place that remembers me." The change began a month later, when the sea turned red at dawn. Not blood red exactly, more like wine poured through silver. Fish floated belly up. Gulls circled but didn't land. The villagers came running, shouting omens. Maren climbed the tower and found the great lantern dimming though the oil was full. She trimmed the wick, whispered the prayer, and for a moment the flame leapt high. Then Elias spoke her name, and the light went out. Darkness swallowed the glass room. The only glow came from the shard at his throat, pulsing faintly like a heart. "Don't be afraid," he said. "I'm the keeper," she answered. "Fear's part of the work." He smiled, and in the absence of light his teeth caught the glimmer of the shard. "It isn't the sea that needs guarding. It's what lives beneath." When the fog lifted the next morning, the water was clear again, but the villagers packed their belongings by noon. They said the flame had failed once and would fail again, that the old stories were waking. By evening, only Maren and Elias remained. The nights grew quieter after the villagers left. Maren could hear the sea breathing through the cracks of the shutters, and sometimes she thought it whispered names that weren't hers. She worked by habit, clean the lenses, polish the brass, fill the oil. Elias followed her with a limp born from whatever wound the sea had given him, never complaining, always watching the horizon as though waiting for it to blink. He rarely slept. When he did, his dreams came loud enough for her to hear. Once she caught words between the gasps, the vow, the flame, the rose and salt. She wrote them down in her father's logbook without understanding why. On the third night after the lantern failed, she found him at the shoreline again. The tide glowed faintly red under the moon. "Tell me the truth," she said. "What are you?" He turned slowly, the wind tangling his silver hair across his face. Something that should have drowned a long time ago. "You bleed," she said. "You breathe. So does the sea." The shard at his throat caught the moonlight, and for a heartbeat she saw her own reflection inside it, distorted, drowning. He reached up and closed his hand around it, dimming the glow. "My kind made a promise once," he said. "We thought we could bind the hunger of the sea by giving it what we loved most. The light above the water, the heart below it. It worked, for a time. And you?" "I was the one who carried the light. Until it went out." Maren stepped closer, then let me relight it. He smiled in that broken way of his. "You don't understand what it costs." "Maybe not. But I'm the keeper. Keeping the light is what I do." They began searching through her father's journals, the older ones he'd never shown her. Most were weather records, but near the end the handwriting grew cramped, the lines more like prayers. The vow holds. The rose burns through salt. The blood remembers. Maren touched the ink and felt it warm under her fingertips. "He knew," she whispered. Elias nodded. "Your father kept more than a lighthouse. He kept the last piece of the old fire." "What fire?" "The one that fell from a rose when a woman refused to die. The story came in fragments after that, like driftwood washing up from a wreck. A vow spoken in an abbey, a flame that could outlast death. Lovers turned to myths. The sea had swallowed most of it, but not all. Some spark had survived, and it had found its way into the lantern that guarded this coast." That night the fog returned thick as wool. The beam barely reached the water. Maren trimmed the wick again and again, but the flame guttered like a candle in a graveyard. She turned to call for Elias and saw the window blacken. Shapes moved beyond the glass. Not ships, not birds. Figures walking where the sea should be. Their outlines trembling as if made from smoke. When the wind hit the panes, it carried the scent of salt and roses crushed underfoot. Elias seized her wrist. Downstairs. They'll see the lights gone. They already know. He dragged her down the spiral stairs, his hand burning hot against her skin. When they reached the lower door, a blow rattled it on its hinges. The old wood held, but dust rained from the beams. They can't come inside if the flame's dead, he said. They feed on the living warmth, on memory. And what are they? The ones who kept the vow and were forgotten. The banging stopped. Silence pressed against the walls. Then a voice, muffled but clear. Keeper's child. Give him back. Maren's heart tripped. Who? They mean me, Elias said softly. I was promised to the sea long ago. The door groaned. Boards splintering. Maren caught the lantern from the table, the small one her father had used when the great light failed. Its oil was half gone, but she struck a spark anyway. The flame caught, and in its glow she saw that the air around Elias shimmered like water. You'll die if you stay, she said. He smiled again, that same unbearable calm. I'm already halfway there. Then he took her face in his hands, gentle as tide foam. When this burns out, don't relight it, let it die. Promise me. She shook her head. I can't. Then you'll keep me here forever. He kissed her forehead, nothing more than the warmth of breath, and turned toward the door. Elias. But he was already opening it, walking into the fog as though it were a road. The shapes outside folded around him. The sea hissed like iron on fire, and the small flame in Maren's lantern flickered once, twice, then steadied. Outside, the wind began to scream. By morning, the sea was calm again, as if the storm had been a dream. Only one footprint led from the door to the tide line. Maren stood there until her skin went blue with cold. The shard of red glass lay half buried in sand. When she touched it, it pulsed once, warm, alive, and she heard, just for a moment, the faint sound of a heartbeat deep beneath the waves. She carried it back to the lighthouse and hung it beside the great lens. When night came, she poured the oil and whispered the prayer her father had written, though she now understood what it truly meant. The flame rose, white at first, then red at the core, burning like a wound that refused to close. Far out to sea, the water blushed in answer. The flame burned 3 nights without pause. Each time Maren closed her eyes, she dreamed of waves folding over glass and of the light reaching down, searching for something that would not rise. By day, she walked the shoreline, collecting bits of driftwood and wreck, filling her pockets with things that might have once belonged to him. A button, a piece of chain, a sliver of red shell. When the tide went out, she thought she heard a whisper left behind in the foam. Keeper. On the 4th night, the wind died completely. The sea lay flat as a mirror. She climbed to the lantern room and found the shard humming against the lens. The light inside it pulsed with the rhythm of breath. For a moment she saw, reflected in the glass, a figure standing on the horizon, still, patient, haloed in the red glow. She went down the cliff path until the stones bled through her shoes. The air smelled of iron and roses. When she reached the water's edge, the figure was waiting just beyond the shallows, the sea rising to his knees. His hair streamed silver in the moonlight. His eyes were as pale as the horizon itself. "Oh, Elias," she said. He smiled faintly. "The sea gave me back long enough to say goodbye." "You can stay?" He shook his head. "The light won't last unless someone tends it." You were born for it, I was born from it. That's the difference. She stepped into the water until the hem of her dress darkened. There must be another way. There always is, he said, but it costs more than it saves. The tide began to rise, slow but certain, whispering around them. The red shimmer spread across the surface like spilled wine. Elias touched her cheek, his hand warm this time, solid. You carry the last of the vow. Keep it kind. Maren felt the pulse through his fingers, through her own chest. She didn't answer. She only reached up and drew the shard from his neck. It broke the skin. A single drop of crimson slid into the water and bloomed outward, luminous. He leaned forward until his forehead rested against hers. When the light falters, listen for the tide. It remembers. The sea lifted him then, not cruelly but with the inevitability of breath leaving a body. He dissolved into light and salt, into 100 brief sparks that drifted back toward the horizon. The waves closed over the glow, and the night fell utterly still. Maren walked back to the lighthouse without looking behind her. She hung the shard where the wick caught, and when she lit it again the flame rose red gold, steady and whole. It threw its beam over the empty village, over the sea that was no longer empty, over a world that would soon forget why the light had changed color. Years passed. The stories grew strange in the telling. Some said the keeper had married the sea. Others said she'd drowned herself to keep the ghosts from coming ashore. Only the light told the truth, pulsing faintly each dawn like a heart remembering a name. On calm mornings, fishermen swore they saw a man walking the shallows, silver-haired, head bowed, following the beam's path. On storm nights, the flame blazed so fiercely it painted the cliffs red as blood, and the waves themselves seemed to bow before it. Maren kept the logbooks as her father had, filling each line with weather, tide, and the word steady. When she was old, she still climbed the stairs to trim the wick. Her hair had gone white as salt, her hands trembled but never failed the light. The last entry she ever wrote was short. The lantern holds, the sea sleeps, he is the tide. When they found the tower empty a week later, the lantern still burned, bright as a small sun. At its base lay a single red rose, petals damp with salt water. Far out on the horizon, the dawn shivered like a breath taken in. For a heartbeat, it looked as though someone had turned toward the light and smiled.
If you liked this story and want to hear more like it, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and remember, some stories only grow in the dark. Good night, everyone.